Hello to my True Blue crew, and Lori wins the prize for being here right on time. Uh, I have a little bit of a wider camera angle just because I'm not doing all that much. I've had a weird lack of motivation. We all lose our sojo sometimes, and it is always very nice just to sit down and sew on a Wednesday evening, get some work done on various projects. And I've had my temperature quilt sitting here for a month since the last time I worked on it. And it's just a little bit more fiddly than I want to tackle on these sessions the last couple weeks. So I have an in-person sewing group coming up this weekend, and I plan to take my temperature quilt. So I'll do a report afterwards. That reminds me, special note, I will not be live next week. I have another commitment in the afternoon, so I'll try to get some extra videos out. And that just gives you more time to hop around YouTube and check out some of the other fabulous creators that have live streams. But I did a little bit of a teaser in the introduction. If you saw the thumbnail for this video, the title picture about my date with Jack, and it's this quilt, and I want to go ahead and show you what I have going on because I thought this was done. I was putting the backing together, getting ready to do some free motion quilting. Hello, Sherry, good to see you. And a couple months ago, I think early August, I was on with Katie, the Greenland quilter, and I found these color block half rectangle triangles in my stash, and I put them together in pinwheels. Pinwheels are one of my favorite basic blocks, and you can see it on my workspace camera. And then I decided just to finish it up with some of these pinwheel borders. And I had the idea that the color of the sashing could just bleed into the pinwheel. But once I got it all together, it looks pretty odd. So you'll have to tell me what you think of those pinwheel corners, how they don't, it doesn't really look like a pinwheel. It just is wrong. And the middle one looks good. So can you see what I meant by that as being different? And honestly, this woke me up. I woke up thinking about this quilt and thinking I can't leave the borders like that. I was all set. I worked all weekend and got the backing together. I've got this fun Crayola print marker, and I thought I had enough to do just, to piece the back with those markers. And then I realized I didn't have enough. Hello, Karen. And so I had some red that I just threw in the center. And then again, I thought I had enough to go around the edge and get what I needed. And I still didn't. So I threw this one little square in. So we'll see how this backing actually looks when it's a big red square and a little tag along in between all of these markers there. But this is going to be a kids charity quilt. And so I thought this would be a fun backing on it. So anyway, like I said, I woke up thinking about this quilt and how the pinwheels don't work in the borders and the sashing. And so it would be better just to take it apart and redo it, because I was picturing walking into my guild meeting and like hiding it in the donation pile. So there's something wrong if you don't want to be associated with the donation. You probably should rethink your options, because just because you're giving something away, you're donating to a charity, you don't know where the quilt's going to be used. You still need to put your best efforts forward and, make it a good project. I remember a minister who runs a homeless shelter in our city talking to our church once, and he would talk about people that would like throw sandwiches over the fence, and they thought that was an acceptable donation. It boggles the mind sometimes, but I can do better. I know better, so we're going to fix it. So let me grab Jack, and someone didn't get the reference when I said I had a date with Jack, and it's because we lovingly refer to our seam ripper as Jack the Ripper. Give a little personality, someone we don't want to spend a lot of time with, but it is necessary. And so I'm going to start with my traditional seam ripping method, and just every third or fourth stitch, I'm going to slide that sharp edge underneath. And my second camera is giving me a little bit of echo, so let me know in the chat if that sound is bad, and I can go try to adjust the volume and stuff. Yes, Karen, it just, I thought I could let it be a little bit odd and wonky and not the typical look, but it continued to bother me. So I played with the colors a little bit and that's what happens with improv sometimes. You put things together, you just, you start sewing without a plan, and you think it's all going to work out, but at some point you have to audition, and I skipped that step. But I did draw it out in EQ8 this morning, and I could see what I needed to do to fix it. But it does involve taking the entire thing apart. Well, I think I can leave the blocks in this middle row should be fine, because that pinwheel looks right. And the reason I say right is because, here, I'll show it on the workspace. This middle pinwheel, the colors alternate. So the white edge of the pinwheel hits the black edge of the sashing, and that works on all the combinations. So that pinwheel stands out as a distinct block. So I'm going to have to change the orientation of some of these side pinwheels, because I can't make the sashing work with both of those pinwheels in the current configuration. So, and now I've completely lost where I was on the ripping, but well, I think it was this. Yep. And someone told me long ago that if your fabric is a standard quality quilting cotton, you can just get it started and go ahead and rip the threads without doing this pre-step of cutting every third or fourth stitch. Oh, Tasha's here. Hi, Tasha. And Sherry's also spent some time with Jack. Such a nice fellow, making the rounds. And Savannah is here. Savannah actually lives down the street from me, but we don't get to see each other very often. She's got a very busy schedule, and I'm working all the time, so it's hard to coordinate. But I have, the weather's cooling off, Savannah. We're going to have to try and get out for some walks now that we're not dying of heat stroke. Do, do, do. So Tasha, what did you end up finding out about Jelly Roll Day? She had asked if anybody celebrated Jelly Roll Day this past weekend, and I hosted a mystery quilt at my local quilt shop. Okay, here we go. There's just a few places where the stitches were a little bit small going over these intersections. I didn't get. Sometimes your great design options just don't work out the way you had hoped. Do like that. If you take a firm grip and just pop those stitches right open, there shouldn't be too much. And since my borders are cut to size, let's see, catching up on the comments. Oh, I scared Lori, but I didn't rip my fabric. It hasn't warped too much. It'll be fine. Oh goodness, Karen ripped out a block on a finished quilt 3 times. Didn't like the fabrics. Oh, okay. Yeah, but the sashing doesn't hold up. And I taught a paper piecing class, and I was letting them know that, you know, if you're paper piecing, you can generally survive 1, maybe 2 rippings of the same seam, but after that, you're going to have to start over. Yeah. So Tasha, tell us more about your podcast. Do you have a list of topics, or do you just go with whatever the mood hits? I do have to grab. I don't want to lean over and expose backsides to cameras. So let me walk around. Okay. I am going to seam rip with my rotary cutter. So again, if you're a little bit nervous, you may want to look away. But this is how I set, and I only do this when I have a nice big long piece. Okay, so I gently open up the seam, and I am using my rotary cutter with very, very gentle pressure right on the stitches. I'm not trying to cut any fabric. I'm just using that sharp edge of my rotary cutter to snip those stitches. And it goes nice and quick. So when you pull that fabric apart, you can see the stitches right there. That's what I'm doing. And it's just the very lightest pressure of your rotary cutter on those stitches will snap them. So And some people use scalpels, medical scalpels, or I don't want to say a box cutter. What are those other tools that our crafters use? You know what I'm thinking of? They're the X-Acto knives. I was like, words, Andy, what are you trying to think of? You could use a blade like that to do this same method, but I just am careful with my rotary cutter. Hold it like a pencil. And like I said, I only do this if I have a long straight seam that I'm trying to rip out. Pop, pop, pop. That's my sound effect as I'm working on these. And I'll do some more show and tell because I'm not hurting the fabric. Trust me. Very, very light pressure on the stitches to cut them. And then, whoops, and I'm at an intersection where I went around the quilt when I actually constructed it. You know, you sew opposite sides sashing together, and then a few more stitches this direction, and we still have no holes. No, we're just all in one piece. Yeah, you'll have to try that out, Tasha, the rotary cutter method. And what I have to scroll back a little bit, Lori was saying. Oh yeah, this the scariness with the rotary cutter. It's fast if you don't want to use blazing speed the first time you ever try it, but hold it like a pencil. I'm gripping the top fabric, and I've kind of got my pinky on the bottom fabric to keep it some tension there between my stitches. So I pull it so that I can see the stitches coming up from the backside, and then I just, light pressure will pop those stitches. Try it. It's a game changer if you ever have to unpick a border. I have been thinking about my guild program for next month and how it would possibly be a great video collaboration for folks that have their own channel. But I need some feedback from you guys, my audience, guys and gals. Would you like to see a more in-depth tour of my sewing space? The program at our guild, where people are going to be sharing their sewing space, what they have set up for piecing, cutting, pressing, fabric storage, all that kind of stuff. And that got me thinking that maybe some of the other YouTubers, Quiltubers, I know they talk about floss tube. We haven't come up with a name, have we, for quilting YouTubers? Quiltubers sounds really awkward, so let's not call ourselves that. Quilting on camera. Okay, Sherry says yes, and Karen says yes, and Tasha says yes. Everybody likes to peek into other people's houses. We're such voyeurs. Tasha says it would motivate her to be clean. Yeah, I would put a huge trigger warning on my segment that says, you know, potential hoarding situation. Because I have to figure out, and this is where my membership with Dara Thomason, the Quilters coach, comes in, because I don't finish things. Quilts, you know, occasionally. I'm trying to get better at finishing, but I'll just start a project and then squirrel ADD, you know, ooh, new shiny, fun new fabric. And then it just gets set aside, and you can kind of see back here on the workspace my boxes piled up for the cotton cuts, but at least those are in boxes. My temperature quilt. But yeah, things just get and then it's like an archaeological dig. You're like, oh my gosh, I was working on this 10 years ago. Why didn't I ever finish it? And oh, I remember that fabric. It was so cute. Why didn't I do something with it? And Lori says she likes to see everyone's design walls. I took down my design wall for years. I had just a batting sheet tacked up on my wall, and that was my design wall. So at least I had a space. And then I think I've mentioned my daughter wanted to get rid of her bookcase and redecorate her room when she moved back home. And so I took her nice IKEA cubby bookcase. And so I've got, you know, different projects in the bookcases. So it's helped a little bit get organized, but I still have, let's see, I'm looking at 2 bags of fabric, you know, that I just piled project scraps into. Whoops. That one I did shave a little bit and got not a complete hole, but a little bit bigger than intended. So you just barely pressure on the stitch, on the thread, until it pops. You're not sawing and cutting any fabric. So I will organize that collaboration for how we want to go behind the scenes and show off our sewing rooms. Get some storage ideas, and, you know, how big is that corner that you're showing on YouTube really? Okay, good night, Tasha. She's got little ones, and she is, I think we are on opposite corners of the United States. She's in Upper New York, and I am down here in southwest corner. Just a few hours from Mexico. Okay, we're coming in on the 4th border here, so we had I mentioned Tasha's podcast. She did a really good episode this week about just go ahead and create art. It's when the world feels heavy, just keep creating as much as you can. which is such a great perspective. And I did mention that on my podcast, Quilting on the Side, we had Dara, the Quilters coach, talk to us about difficult conversations and controversy, which we need to get better as a society, listening to different views. We've really put up our barricades, and we don't want to listen to another perspective, which I think is detrimental, and it's uncomfortable. And it's why do you put yourself in an uncomfortable situation? Well, because we're not all the same, and we have to practice listening with respect to opposing viewpoints, rather than just trying to shout other people down. But I have promised that this is not a political arena, so we just talk about quilting here. As controversial as I'll get is whether or not we pre-wash. So, and I'm like 90% of the time I do not pre-wash. So if that bothers you, I'm sorry. I don't like it. I don't like taking the time. I'm a fairly lazy, and lazy is not the right word. Obviously, if you're going to sit and cut up little pieces of fabric and sew them all together in different patterns, you're not lazy. I choose not to do some of those tedious tasks. And I'm impatient. I want to get to the fun part, the quilting part, faster. And that's why I don't pre-wash. But talking about fun things to do with quilting, in this week's episode of Quilting on the Side, we talked to Teresa Benson, who is the AI quilter. So she's using artificial intelligence, chat GPT type programs to help her with quilting, and not just design. She, in terms of like block design and writing patterns, that's where a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm just a hobby quilter. I use someone else's patterns. I'm not a designer. I wouldn't have any use for AI. But she gave us a really good example about using AI prompts to generate color schemes for your quilts. So that was really interesting. Color is one of those areas that I have never been shy. And I'm going to start this next bit with my seam ripper, just because when I use the rotary cutter, it helps to have about an inch to get started. I know, Lori, isn't this fast? It is a great method. Yes, if there are any qualms about nicking yourself, then yes, keep Band-Aids handy. But I have not had an accident with this method. I'll have to get my Halloween episode out about my horror stories about quilting and share that as we get into October. Does anyone have Halloween decorations out yet? Have you had your pumpkin spice latte? I'm more of an apple cider person than pumpkin spice, but pumpkin chocolate chip muffins sound pretty good. Yes, sherry reds. And as I look at this, I don't think any of these bright colors were pre-washed, and so I may end up, I don't know if this orangey red is going to bleed, and even the black sometimes can make it dingy, but that's why I invest in color catchers, and I throw a bunch of those in the wash when I wash the finished quilt. My other dilemma when I have a quilt like this for charity quilts, I want to use some kind of all over design, whether it's meander or loops or, you know, something quick and easy that can get this done. And then I can have it, check it off my list and load up the next customer quilt on my long arm. But with such drastic black and white and then these bright colors, I don't know what color thread to use. I have kind of a rainbow, soft pastel shades, multicolored thread that I was thinking might be okay. And then I was thinking, you know, I'd have to see, it's going to sound funny, but I'd have to see how lime green looks. Sometimes lime green can be a really good neutral. I think gray would just look too dingy, maybe a light blue or a yellow. So what color thread would you use? We were talking about AI today and the potential it has to like do spelling and grammar checks. And in my job, any of the documents that we write need to be accessible for people with low vision and low hearing. So some of those accessibility checks, we could, you know, you could train an AI bot to run those checks. And then we're like, oh, but then will that take away our authorship? You know, we're easily replaced if we can program AI to do all these things. So strange world we live in. And Sherry's got her table runners with black cats and pumpkins. Sounds very festive for the fall season. I saw a new maple leaf block that was done with triangles, kind of I want to say either, if you know your classic quilt blocks, Dove in the Window or Lady of the Lake. I don't quite know exactly what those blocks are, but they have kind of the 3 triangles in the larger unit. And the maple leaf was done with those kind of elements. It was really, really cool. I'll have to download or sketch that type of block out because I really like that pattern. I can't believe that we're at the end of September already. Okay, I've got what, 2 more rows, 2 more sides to take off. And then I have to take the sashing rows apart because I have to fix some of the pinwheels. And then I'll have to take some of the pinwheel blocks and apart and turn them so that they can line up. Because I want it to go like this, where this pinwheel is touching opposite pieces, but I don't want any of these where the colors bleed into the pinwheel. So I'll have to turn that around and then see if that works. See, I'm not going to be able to do it. I can't even salvage that in the middle. I'll have to unpick it here and move that to the end. So Sherry is saying maybe yellow or orange. Orange is probably a good idea because there was a lot of orange feel in these different blocks. Okay, so where am I to do these two sides? And I have, since I'm sitting here showing all my mistakes and talking about seam ripping, I'm going to have to rip out an entire quilt of quilting, not just the piecing, but the actual quilting, because I'm stubborn. I don't stop when I notice there's a mistake. Oh, it's one of my worst habits. So I just kept, after the first row, I saw there was a problem with this quilt, and I was asking some of my long arm friends, and I was like, oh, you know, since they didn't get instantaneously answers, I had to wait a day, and that gave me hours more to do horrible quilting. And the design, the stitches are fine. It's just that it's causing lumps in different places. And so a friend was telling me I should have like used the magnet bar on the leading edge of my top. Oh, I quilted the whole darn thing. And then I thought I could fix some of the lumps by adding more quilting. When I knew I was going to have to rip out, I should have just stopped. And I never just stop. This is like the third time in my life that I've gone ahead and was like, oh, it won't be, I'll finish and see how it looks then. No, Andy, it's not ever going to look better. So, but I don't want to take all this negative energy into the quilt any further. So I need to find a happy place, you know, find some good podcasts and have several evenings with the seam ripper on this big quilt. But speaking of podcasts or shows that I could binge while I'm doing this terrible task, Survivor starts tonight, season 49. I could rip out my quilting while I'm watching Survivor. Oh, Lori is going to Houston for the first time. That is amazing. I am not, because I still have a full-time job and I'm using my vacation time over the holidays. So I can't take leave and do quilting stuff until I retired. So I'm holding my breath for a couple more years. Okay, so there's another, and see, when this is another one that's, I did part of it good, but I just couldn't make it work with the rest of it. Yeah, Sherry, ripping out long arm stitches is quite horrible. And I've tried to use the rotary cutter method in between the layers of a long arm quilt, and it doesn't work with curvy. It's much better on a straight line. So I just use my seam ripper from the back when I have to take out long arm stitches. So the other fun thing going on right now is the WNBA playoffs. And I'm totally a fair weather fan. Years ago when the league first started, because I am a huge basketball fan, March Madness, don't talk to me while the basketball games are on. And I enjoy women's basketball. I don't watch college. See, and that's where I have it reversed. I will watch men's college basketball and not women, but I'll watch women's pro and not men. So it's, you know, inconsistent, but whatever. And I did, for a couple years, I had season tickets to the Mercury and just had a fabulous time. And every so often, you know, they'll make a championship run and get into the playoffs. And they had a nail biter. They came back from like 16, 18 points down last night, forced overtime, and then won the game. It was glorious. You love when that happens, when you're when it's your team that's coming back, when you're the other team and you're the opponent kills you. It's not as much fun, obviously, but so my husband doesn't want to go to the games with me though, so we'll find a sports bar somewhere and have our Friday night date, and I'll get to watch basketball, because that's the other thing. I don't subscribe to the extended cable package that shows all the games, so I'm scrambling to find the game online somewhere or a radio broadcast or something. And I ended up on a YouTube watch party where the person had the TV going off camera and they were just kind of providing commentary, and what everybody in chat was talking about the game. And I was wondering if that would be fun to do with Survivor. Have, you know, if there was anybody else that liked the show Survivor and wanted to be in a live chat and watch the show West Coast time. Okay, I think that was the fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. Okay. So now I have to carefully figure out which, and like I said, I don't think any of these pinwheels in their current configuration will work, because I have to rotate this black 90 degrees so that it hits an alternate color. There's no way. See, it has to go like this. The white has to hit the stripe, and none of these will work. So I have to take out some of the pinwheels. So this gets put aside. And then I have to go clean up all the strings I just ripped out. And like I said, with the smaller seams, I'm going to go back to the old-fashioned way. And I saw a totally random change of subject here, but why we do our WIP Wednesday, our sewing on Wednesday. Someone shared all of the daily tea towels. I don't know if anyone else from your grandmothers had the flour sack type tea towels that had the days of the week on them, and they had the different chores. Monday is a wash day. Then Tuesday would be an ironing day. And once you've washed and ironed, you're ready to do your mending. So mending happened on Wednesday, which is why we continue to sew on Wednesdays. I thought that was a really cute little connection there with those days of the week and the different chores that happened on the different days. Yeah, isn't that fun, Karen, to have those towels that have the different little scenes, housekeeping themed chores? And they dry your dishes so much better than the towels that you get today. I don't know what changed. Probably all the synthetics fibers now. The old-fashioned cotton, 100% cotton, works for the job. Okay, so I've got that one. This one is... I was very domestic today, and I made a lasagna for dinner, so I have to watch my time so I can put that in the oven. Karen is saying she buys flour sack towels. I'm going to have to find some because these are, mine are, they've got to be a muslin because they're softer than what I would think of as flour sacks. And they're plain white, but they've got the little embroidered corner on them that my great-grandmother did. Okay. But like I said, I think I'm going to have to switch the order of this around because this center pinwheel will not work on Walmart mainstay. So there's our, yeah, this is not going to work. So I'm going to have to take one of my sashing strips off. Okay, so this is now going to be, it was in the center of my sashing row. It's now going to be on the end because I have to turn it around and make a different pinwheel that will fit right there on those two blocks coming together. Yes, Karen is saying she uses the flour sack towels for drying dishes and for pressing cloths. That would work well. Okay, so see, because that's not, yeah, I have to set aside those parts that can be used. Here's another one where I'm just going to take off. Take off one end of the, and I'm being slow here. I need to. And I was not sewing very well because I have really tiny stitches going into that intersection where I sewed over the seam of the half square triangle. Okay. There is that. yeah, have to take all of these apart and then make 4 new pinwheels for the sides. Nice. Those parts. Have a good night, Sherry. She had to take off. Sherry goes live on Tuesdays, usually earlier in the day. So, and I thank you for keeping me company while I completed this terrible chore. But I am feeling good that I will have all my parts ready to reassemble. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4 pinwheels that will need to get taken apart. I don't think I have any black and white squares left over, or I would just save those for a different project. And okay, so those parts are done. And as I said, I need to take apart these pinwheels. And then I will need to double check so that I can make sure that they look the way they're supposed to in the finished sashing. So very, very tedious, but you have to listen to your quilts. And like I said earlier, this was keeping me up at night thinking and trying to decide if I could live with myself when things weren't visually appealing the way I wanted them to be. And you know, there's a saying that goes around, if you make one mistake, it's a mistake. If you repeat the mistake, then it's a design feature. I didn't want that design feature to stay in my quilt. So That is how we ended up spending the evening with Jack the Ripper. And I have to ask, how often do you replace your seam rippers? Because that little blade can get dull, and you should probably think about replacing it. Have a nice sharp edge. It was just a few years ago that I replaced mine, and it was made this terrible task a little bit easier when I had a brand new blade. And then the terrible thing is going to be coming through and pulling all these loose threads that I've ripped out. Does anybody have that little knob on the end of their seam ripper that is supposed to get all the little threads? I just use my fingernails. Yeah, Karen, I'm blazing through this terrible task. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 more seams. No, because there's 1, 2, 1. Yeah, just 2. So 4 more seams. Thank you for keeping company. And then I just move over if I can't catch one of the stitches. So then I'm going to have to get that section from the middle because it didn't want to. Yep, right there. It was hard for me to catch those stitches on the back. I was stabbing the fabric and not getting underneath the stitches. You notice I just adjusted my posture, sat up straight. I'm working with a trainer at the gym, and he's having me do these like butterfly arm things. Notice my wobbly skin, and women of a certain age will recognize that. But it's strengthening your latissimus dorsi, I guess, if I remember my anatomy. Your big muscles in your back get those stronger. So because we spend so much time hunched over, that we really need to counter that movement. And so lay down on your stomach, arch your back up a little bit until your chest is off the floor, and wave your arms, and that'll strengthen your back. Oh, an eraser on the threads. Thanks for that hint, Karen. I'll have to remember that. Did you say you were going to Road to California, Karen? I know you live that direction. I'm not remembering exactly what we've talked about before. Okay, 2 more seams. Last one. Gotta be able to get it started to get that satisfying rip for the very last one. Oh, that's right, Lori. Lori's driving from Georgia, and Karen might come down from out of state. That would be great. We will have to coordinate because I have decided to drive over from Phoenix, so I'll be in at the Road to California show, and I definitely want to have a Quilters YouTube meetup. So I will publicize that event. And I was, Karen, you're saying you didn't see anything in terms of the teachers and the classes that you want to take. I can usually find something that I'll just, go ahead and sit through. I think for this, I'm going to end up driving over on Friday and just staying maybe just probably 2 nights because I want to hang out with everybody. So yeah, I'll be able to see a little bit of the show on Friday and then spend a good long time seeing the whole show and the vendors on Saturday, and then drive home on Sunday. And my husband might come and hang out too. He's usually pretty good about just because I want the company on the road. Yes, and shopping. But once we do our quilt room tour and everybody sees how much stash I have, they will keep me from spending because it's going to take 3 lifetimes to sew what I already own. I don't necessarily need to buy anything else, but there's always good stuff coming up. So like I said, everybody thinks that pinwheels don't have a direction, but they do. This is one direction, and now I need to do the opposite so that I can go. Let's see. This isn't going to work. Let's see. Oh, like that. Yes. How in the world am I going to make this work? Let me see if I can visualize it from this one. Okay, I've got my one down here, and then I will have to. Oh, okay. So I have to get the dark. That was my problem with this. You don't have your diagonal coming into the center, and that's why. So I was like, I don't see a pinwheel. Yes, like that. Okay. That. And like that. And then that pinwheel, my board down a little bit. That pinwheel will connect to the sashing that runs into this pinwheel. And these 2 pinwheels are spinning in opposite directions. Yeah, Karen, you're giving me advice. It doesn't work on YouTube. Oh, Thank you. We're real friends, so she's going to see lots of space in my sewing room for more fabric. Such an enabler, as the best friends are. Thank you for that, Karen. Yes, that will be a much more pleasing look to this quilt to keep all the pinwheels going. And yeah, so let me lay out my other squares now that I have my directions right in my head. And there's going to be 4 of these, so I put 4 triangles in each stack. 1, 2, 4. And yes, I will pick all the strings off of them as I go. And then I've got my little iron right here. The cord's hung up on something, so I can't bring it into the camera view. But I'll use that little iron and give those a press before I do my second attempt at sewing those pinwheels to finish this quilt. And yeah, all the math is done. Everything's going to come back together really nicely. And I thank you again for hanging out with me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. So we'll get this pinwheel project finished up. Probably not on camera. I'll work on it in between other things. And I am not doing a live next Wednesday. I have another appointment. And October may get kind of messy, but I will put out some other content and put reminders on the community posts. So if you're hanging out on YouTube and you come across True Blue Quilts, there will be stuff for you. I've got a special event planned for October. And if you want to be the first to hear about that, you need to sign up for my newsletter and I will share it over there. So everybody have a great night and happy quilting. I'll see you next time.